Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a bit of a historical shortcut, straight into the 19th century.
Yeah, an era of steam engines, massive industry, and also, kind of paradoxically, this really intense obsession with contacting the dead.
Exactly. Our mission today is to really pull back the curtain on American spiritualism. We want to look at how this practice, which started, in a simple farmhouse,
Just a small house, yeah.
how it ballooned into this huge social and, religious movement,
Uh-huh.
but one that was constantly fighting off accusations of being a total fraud.
And it's crucial to understand the context, the sheer weight of grief back then. Victorian times, you had sky-high infant mortality, epidemics sweeping through.
Not to mention the Civil War later on.
Right, death was just present. All the time, people were desperate for some kind of certainty, some comfort. Spiritualism wasn't just offering vague hope.
No, it was offering proof, or what they presented as proof.
Tangible proof, direct communication with loved ones who'd passed. That idea was revolutionary. Think of Mary Todd Lincoln right there in the White House.
Holding séances after her son Willie died.
She needed that connection, that direct, almost demonstrable link, badly.
And it wasn't some fringe thing. This became massive mainstream. We're talking millions of followers just in the U.S. really quickly, which is why this deep dive is so interesting. You've got this constant push and pull. On one side, true believers, and some really brilliant people among them.
Absolutely, like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, no less. He spent his later years championing spiritualism.
And respected scientists, too, like Sir Oliver Lodge.
Right, but then on the other side, you have these incredibly dedicated skeptics, master illusionists, like Harry Houdini.
Who made it his personal mission.
Oh, completely. And formal investigative groups like the Sabert Commission, their entire job was basically to expose the fraud they believed was behind it all.
So our goal here is to unpack the whole show. We'll start right at the beginning, that farmhouse, then trace how it grew into this alternative religious force.
We'll look at the big names, the famous mediums, and the infamous ones.
Definitely the infamous ones. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the actual tricks they use. How do they make ghosts appear, levitate tables, get messages from spirits?
Yeah, we're decoding the beliefs, the grief, but also, let's be honest, the surprisingly big business of ghosts in the 19th century.
Okay, let's dive in. We absolutely have to start at ground zero. Hydesville, New York, 1848.
The very beginning of what we call modern American spiritualism. Everything really hinges on what supposedly happened in this little cottage with two young sisters.
Fox sisters. Margaretta, she was 14, and Catherine, just 12.
And it's interesting, the house itself apparently had a bit of a history before the Foxes even moved in.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the sources mention previous tenants, the Bells, the Weekmans. They'd apparently heard strange noises, raps, that kind of thing, too.
But March 31st, 1848, that's the key date. That's when the girls' raps allegedly became communicative. They supposedly set up a system.
Right, a simple code. 1 rap for no, 2 for uncertain, 3 for yes. Pretty basic stuff.
And through this code, they started having a conversation with, well, an entity.
An entity who identified itself as a peddler, Charles B. Rosna. And he claimed he'd been murdered.
Murdered right there in the house 5 years earlier. Over, what was it, $500?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
A relatively small sum. And he said his body was buried in the cellar, 10 feet down.
Now, this is where it gets compelling, at least for the believers at the time. They tried digging right away, April 1st.
But they hit water almost immediately. Couldn't get far.
But then, months later, late July 1848, the water level dropped. They tried digging again.
And this time, they found something. Human hair, some bones, bits of crockery. Later on, someone with anatomical knowledge apparently confirmed some bones were from a human skull.
So whether it was real or just a, massive coincidence,
Yeah.
That discovery was huge. It seemed to confirm the spirit story.
Absolutely. It was like, okay, the spirit world just gave us a verifiable fact. That poured fuel on the fire.
But turning a spooky family story into a national movement, that doesn't just happen. Someone had to see the potential, right?
Enter the older sister, Leah, Mrs. Fish, later Mrs. Underhill. She was the one with the business sense.
She saw the dollar signs?
You could say that. She organized the first proper public demonstration, November 14th, 1849, in Rochester at Corinthian Hall.
And that's the moment it shifts from a private weirdness to a public performance. You could buy a ticket.
Exactly. It laid the foundation for spiritualist mediumship becoming a profession, often a very profitable one.
And the skepticism, which became like the shadow of this movement for decades?
Yeah.
It started right there, didn't it? At that first public show.
Instantly, people were demanding investigations from day one. A committee was formed right there in Rochester.
And they put the girls through quite an ordeal, I understand.
Yeah. Very invasive physical searches. Stripped them down, looking for ways they might be making the sounds themselves. Cracking joints was the immediate suspicion.
But the committee couldn't prove anything.
Nope. Couldn't find any trickery at that point. Which, ironically, just made the sisters seem even more genuinely supernatural to the public. It kind of backfired on the skeptics initially.
Which makes what happened 40 years later even more shocking. 1888. Margaret Fox, Margaret Kane, by then gives this huge public confession.
Right, in the New York Herald. Flat out called the whole thing a gross fraud from the very beginning.
And she explained exactly how they did it.
Yep. Said it was all about cracking and manipulating their toe joints to make the rapping sounds. And she laid the blame squarely on Leah, saying she orchestrated it all for money.
And her sister Catherine backed her up.
Shortly after, Catherine confirmed it, saying spiritualism was, and this is a quote, all humbuggery, every bit of it.
Wow. A confession from the founders themselves. You'd think that would just destroy the whole movement overnight.
You would think so.
But it didn't, did it? The sources say spiritualism just kept rolling along. Why didn't that bombshell confession collapse everything?
Well, by 1888, the movement was much bigger than the Fox sisters. It had taken on a life of its own.
It wasn't about them anymore.
Not really. It was about the millions of people who desperately needed to believe in communication with the dead. Their grief, their hope. That was the real fuel.
So they just ignored the confession? Or explained it away?
Pretty much. Some dismissed Margareta and Catherine as, tragic figures who'd lost their gift or been corrupted. Others saw it as proof that maybe the spirits had abandoned them, but not that communication itself was impossible.
The emotional need just bulldozed the facts.
Exactly. The belief system, the emotional infrastructure, was just too strong by then to be dismantled by a couple of confessions about cracking toes.
And that powerful emotional core meant the movement grew way beyond just parlor tricks. It exploded. You said over 1 million followers in the U.S. within just 3 years.
Yeah, the growth was incredibly rapid. And it started to organize itself, becoming a genuine social and, religious alternative.
We see that with things like the camp meeting movement, starting around 1866.
Right. These were huge outdoor gatherings, sometimes lasting days. They really helped solidify spiritualism as a distinct religious option, often defining itself against mainstream Protestantism.
How so? What was the main pitch?
Comfort. A lot of the speakers, many of them former ministers themselves, like a Dr. P. Clark mentioned in the sources, they deliberately rejected the fire and brimstone stuff.
No angry God, no hell.
Exactly. They preached what they called an angel gospel. Good news. They emphasized there was no angry God frowning down, and crucially, no endless hell yawning beneath our feet.
That's a pretty appealing message, especially compared to some of the prevailing theology of the time.
Absolutely. It was brilliant marketing, really, offering this optimistic, progressive afterlife. Your loved ones weren't suffering in hell. They were happy, evolving spirits in the summerland. It promised glad tidings and predicted this brand new movement would sweep the nation.
And people showed up.
In droves. That first camp meeting reportedly had over 7,000 people attend the Sunday afternoon session alone.
But there was some debate within the movement too, right? About how much to reject.
Yeah, there was a tension. Some, like a Dr. Luke A. Plum, argued for keeping a Christian element. They didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Trying to find a balance, maybe make it seem less radical?
Possibly. Trying to integrate it, make it more acceptable within the broader Christian society, while still rejecting the doctrines they found, harsh or off-putting.
And another really crucial aspect of this movement's social impact was the role it gave women.
Oh, absolutely massive. In the 19th century, women were largely barred from public speaking, especially on religious or political stages.
But spiritualism offered a way around that.
A brilliant loophole. If a woman was a trance medium, she wasn't speaking for herself. She was merely a vessel, channeling a spirit.
So the words had authority, but it wasn't her authority, technically.
Exactly. It gave women this incredible platform. They could stand up and lecture on incredibly important social issues.
Like Cora L.V. Scott.
Perfect example. Started lecturing in trance when she was only 15. And because she was supposedly channeling spirits, she could talk passionately about abolition, temperance, women's suffrage.
Things would have been very difficult for a woman to speak about publicly otherwise.
Hugely difficult. She gained immense influence. Went on to become a spiritualist pastor in 1875, even co-founded the National Spiritualist Association of Churches later on.
It's this fascinating use of the supernatural to gain very real-world political and social agency.
A complete inversion of the usual power dynamics. And this appeal wasn't limited to one social class, it went right to the top.
We mentioned Mary Todd Lincoln in the White House.
And other first ladies, like Edith Wilson, Florence Harding, reportedly consulted mediums or showed interest, even Queen Victoria over in England.
So it definitely wasn't seen as just some, common folk superstition. It had real cachet across society.
Deeply embedded. Which brings us back to the core attraction. The phenomena, the things people supposedly saw and heard in seances. How did they actually categorize these mediumistic abilities?
Right. What were the different types?
They generally talked about two main categories. First, you had mental mediumship. This was all about intangible stuff.
Like psychics today, maybe? Seeing or hearing things?
Sort of, yeah. The medium tunes in, sensing or seeing spirits, getting messages, symbols. Leonora Piper was very famous for this, known for going into these deep, long trances.
Okay, so that's mental. What was the other type?
Physical mediumship. And this is the stuff that really drew the crowds and the skeptics.
Because it involved things you could actually see or hear?
Exactly. Physical effects, loud raps, objects moving on their own telekinesis tables levitating, or even the full materialization of a spirit.
Using ectoplasm, that famous spooky substance.
Right. They claimed it was this ethereal matter, kind of gooey, formed from the medium's own body.
You'd think scientists would just laugh this off.
You would. But many leading scientists of the era actually jumped right in. They didn't dismiss it.
Why not? What were they thinking?
Well, you have to remember the context. They'd just seen technology like the telegraph and telephone completely revolutionize communication, breaking down physical barriers.
So they thought, maybe the barrier between life and death is next.
Kind of, yeah. They approached it with this very 19th century materialist mindset. If we can send voices over wires, maybe we can communicate with spirits. They saw it as potentially the next leap in communication tech.
A sort of spiritual telephone.
Exactly. Some even tried to apply new physics concepts like electromagnetism to explain how spirits might interact with the world. They thought maybe mediums were just tuning into different frequencies.
So people like Sir Oliver Lodge, the physicist involved in radio.
He was a huge proponent. He literally thought seances were like tuning a radio, with the medium acting as the receiver for spirit frequencies.
And William Crookes, the chemist. Alfred Russel Wallace, the biologist.
All prominent believers. It's quite startling. Even inventors like Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell were reportedly experimenting with devices.
Trying to build a machine to talk to ghosts.
Basically, yes. Trying to create physical tools for spirit communication.
But that very physicality, the ectoplasm and the floating objects that drew the scientists in, that's also what made the fraud easier to spot, eventually.
Oh, absolutely. The physical stuff left traces. Let's talk about the materialization frauds. They're kind of central to the whole story of deception.
Like Florence Cook and her famous spirit guide, Katie King.
Right. And interestingly, Cook was actually trained by another medium, Frank Hearn, who was also known to be fraudulent. There was a sort of apprenticeship in deception happening.
Yet Sir William Crookes, the respected scientist, vouched for her. He claimed he saw both Cook and Katie King at the same time.
He did. He defended her fiercely, even when things looked really suspicious. Like, witnesses said Katie King was noticeably taller and broader than Florence Cook.
Which would mean the spirit somehow added mass to her body.
Crookes was apparently willing to accept that. He insisted he had nothing to retract. But despite his support, Cook got caught red-handed cheating at least 4 times. In one famous incident, skeptics literally grabbed the spirit during a seance, and, well, it turned out to be Florence Cook wearing a flimsy white gown.
Okay. Then there was Madame d'Espérance.
Elizabeth Hope.
Yes, she was known for automatic writing, but also for materializing a spirit named Yolande.
And she got caught, too.
Yep. 1880. A sitter grabbed Yolande, realized it was just Madame d'Espérance herself, but she just kept performing afterwards. The audacity is pretty amazing.
And the methods became more desperate as controls got tighter.
Shockingly so. Look at Eva Carriere or Martha Barad. Her specialty was producing ectoplasm.
The spirit goo.
Right. But investigations eventually revealed this ectoplasm was often just strips of cloth, gauze, maybe muslin, sometimes with faces cut out of paper stuck to it.
Cut out faces, like from magazines.
Exactly. Investigators found ectoplasm featuring portraits of contemporary figures, President Wilson, King Ferdinand of Bulgaria, clearly snipped from newspapers or magazines.
That's pretty blatant. How did they hide this stuff during searches? This is where it gets really grim, and it shows the lengths they'd go to. As investigators got stricter about searching clothing and props, some mediums, including Carriere, according to reports,
Yes.
they resorted to hiding the materials, the cloth, the paper faces inside their own body cavities, vaginally or rectally.
Wow. To smuggle it into the seance room.
Yes. It speaks volumes about the pressure, the potential rewards, and maybe the desperation involved in keeping the illusion going, risking health and dignity like that.
It wasn't just materializations, though. Levitation was a huge draw, too. Daniel Dunglis Home.
Ah, D.D. Home, the superstar levitator. Conan Doyle called him spotless, a worker of miracles.
But not everyone agreed.
Far from it. Skeptics, even a British judge, called him a greedy imposter. His most famous levitations, like rising a few inches off the floor as witnessed by crooks.
Always seemed to happen under questionable conditions, right?
Always. Poor lighting, darkness, observers kept at a distance. No one ever reliably reported seeing him float clear of everything in good light under controlled conditions.
So how did he do it?
He was a master of suggestion and exploiting the environment. If people thought they saw him float out a window and back in the dark, who could definitively refute it? He relied on the fact that people, especially in polite society, were hesitant to jump up and grab the medium.
Playing on expectations and social norms.
Precisely. And then you have Eusapia Palladino, the Italian medium, famous for making tables fly around the room.
Attributed to her spirit guide, John King, I believe.
That was the story. She was a sensation across Europe. But even her biggest supporters admitted she cheated sometimes.
But she was definitively exposed.
Oh, yes. 1895, during a series of séances investigated at Cambridge University.
What did they catch her doing?
They proved she was subtly freeing her hands and feet from the control of the people sitting next to her who were supposed to be holding her.
So she could physically manipulate the table and objects herself.
Exactly. Using her freed hand or foot to lift the table, move things, create the phenomena herself. One of the key investigators, Frederick Myers, concluded her skill in doing this without getting caught must have taken long practice.
So less spiritual power, more skilled stage magic.
Essentially, yes. Years of practice in deception.
Which explains why it took equally skilled people, often from the world of magic, to effectively debunk them. Like Harry Houdini.
The ultimate debunker. His fight against spiritualism wasn't just a hobby, it became an obsession, an all-consuming mission.
Culminating in those 1926 congressional hearings, trying to get fortune-telling banned.
That was the peak of his crusade. He went before Congress and stated point blank that spiritualism, meaning communication through mediums, was a fraud from start to finish.
And he believed his background gave him an edge.
Absolutely. His famous line was, "It takes a flim-flammer to catch a flim-flammer." He understood illusion, misdirection, secret devices.
He knew the tricks of the trade.
He used that knowledge relentlessly against the mediums.
This put him directly at odds with his former friend, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
A really bitter falling out. Doyle, the staunch believer, actually thought Houdini himself had immense psychic powers, but was just too arrogant to admit it.
While Houdini thought Doyle was completely taken in.
He called Doyle one of the greatest dupes. Said he couldn't apply the critical thinking of his own creation, Sherlock Holmes, to his own beliefs. It really shows the deep emotional divide.
And at those congressional hearings, Houdini didn't just talk. He demonstrated.
Oh, yeah, he put on a show for the lawmakers. He showed them how a medium could use a spirit trumpet, this cone-shaped thing, to whisper right into someone's ear using ventriloquism or just clever positioning.
Proving it wasn't a spirit voice.
Right. And he demonstrated slate writing tricks, too. How you could prepare slates with hidden messages using flaps or invisible ink. Showed them exactly how it was done.
It's tragic he died so soon after, just months later, amid threats from angry spiritualists, apparently.
Yeah, his campaign stirred up a lot of hostility, but he wasn't the only organized skeptical force. You mentioned the Seibert Commission earlier.
Right, funded by the University of Pennsylvania back in the 1880s.
They conducted a really thorough investigation between 1884 and 1887. Their archives still exist, records, testimonies, even some of the actual slates used by mediums they tested.
And what did they conclude?
Damning results. They found that the mediums who actually agreed to be tested under controlled conditions, like the very famous Henry Slade.
Who Conan Doyle still defended.
Exactly. The commission found Slade and others were using pretty basic, sometimes clumsy tricks, things easily detectable when proper controls were in place. They basically confirmed systematic fraud.
And the sources get really specific about the common tricks, don't they? Confirming there was this whole cottage industry supplying mediums with gear.
Oh yeah, you could apparently buy seance equipment. For the raps, beyond the original toe cracking, mediums might use hidden rubber tubes to make voice-like sounds or conceal things on their body that they could subtly move to create scratching or tapping.
And spirit photography. That seems particularly cruel, preying on grief.
Definitely one of the most emotionally manipulative. The main method was double exposure.
How did that work?
The photographer would take a plate, expose it very briefly to someone, maybe an assistant dressed up in, like a sheet or gauzy fabric to look like a ghost, before the actual paying customer arrived.
So the ghost image was already faintly on the plate.
Exactly. Then they'd bring the sitter in, pose them, and take their picture on the same plate. When developed, voila. A ghostly figure appears behind the grieving person.
And that's how William Mumler got that infamous photo of Mary Todd Lincoln with what looked like Abe's ghost.
Precisely that technique. Mumler was eventually charged with fraud over his spirit photography business.
Were there other photo tricks?
Yeah, some involved chemically painting a faint ghost image onto the camera's focusing screen using something like sulfate of quinine. Invisible when dry, but it would register slightly on the sensitive photographic plate during the exposure. Pretty ingenious, really.
Okay, back to the slates. The messages appearing seemingly out of nowhere. How?
It was an art form, often involved specially made slates with hidden compartments or sliding panels. The message was pre-written and hidden.
Like a magic trick.
Very much so. Or they'd use invisible ink. Lemon juice was common, or copper sulfate solution. Write the message, let it dry. Then later, maybe during the séance, secretly apply a developing agent.
Like waving it over ammonia fumes for the copper sulfate.
Something like that, yeah. Or heat for the lemon juice. The writing appears magically.
And what about clairvoyance? Knowing things about the sitters they shouldn't know.
Often just good old-fashioned research or trickery. Mrs. Piper, despite her fame, was suspected of getting info from public records, like who's who, or maybe even her husband's old diary entries about local families.
Basic information gathering.
Or outright deception, like the medium Foster who'd have people write names on paper pellets. He'd pretend to get a psychic hit, but investigators saw him using sleight of hand to swap the sitter's pellets for blank ones he had hidden, reading the real names later.
But it wasn't always about money, was it? The motivation.
That's an important point the sources make. Yes, money was often a huge driver, but some unpaid mediums were caught cheating too.
Why? What was in it for them?
Vanity, perhaps? The attention, the flattery, being seen as special, possessing these wonderful powers. The ego boost could be just as intoxicating as cash.
Okay, so we've covered the mediums, the believers, the scientists who got involved, the skeptics. But there's another related movement we need to touch on to really get the full picture of this era's esoteric landscape.
Right. Theosophy. And its founder, Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, HPB.
How did theosophy relate to spiritualism? Were they the same thing?
Related, but distinct. They emerged from the same cultural soup, that same search for hidden truths. But theosophy positioned itself as, well, more intellectually sophisticated.
Less about wrapping tables, more about cosmic secrets.
Kind of. Blavatsky claimed her teachings weren't her own. She said they came directly from a secret brotherhood of highly evolved spiritual adepts living in Tibet, the Masters or Mahatmas.
Moria and Kudhumi were the main ones.
Those were the names she used most often, yes. This claim gave her teachings instant authority. She wasn't just channeling Uncle Joe, she was relaying wisdom from enlightened masters.
So what was the core philosophy she was pushing?
It was this really complex blend. She took ideas from Hinduism and Buddhism concepts like reincarnation, karma, vast cosmic cycles.
Like Manvantaras and Kalpas.
Exactly. And she tried to weave them together with 19th century scientific ideas, especially Darwin's theory of evolution. She implied evolution not just to bodies, but to consciousness, to souls, moving through different root races over immense periods.
And she tied this ancient wisdom specifically to India.
Very much so. This tapped into that Victorian fascination with the East, Orientalism. HPB argued India was the true source of all hidden knowledge. She lived there for several years, from 1879 to 1885, and theosophy gained a significant following there, too.
Seen maybe as an alternative to Western materialism.
That was part of the appeal, yes. And interestingly, theosophy attracted some of the same prominent figures who were interested in spiritualism.
Like Edison, Wallace, Crookes.
Yep, they dipped their toes in both worlds, it seems, exploring these different avenues of the unseen.
But just like the mediums, Blavatsky faced accusations of fraud too, didn't she?
Oh, big time. The Society for Psychical Research, the SPR, a group dedicated to investigating paranormal claims, conducted a major investigation into her.
And the verdict.
Not good for HPB. The SPR's report basically concluded she was a massive fraud. They accused her of faking the miraculous appearance of letters from the masters, using trick cabinets, accomplices, the whole 9 yards.
So even the supposedly more highbrow esoteric movement had the same issues with deception.
It seems the human element, the temptation to fudge the evidence or outright fake it, was present across the board.
But Theosophy's legacy seems different from spiritualism's. It had a lasting impact, especially in the arts.
Hugely influential, yes. That's probably its most enduring cultural footprint. Early abstract painters were deeply inspired by theosophical ideas.
Like Hilma of Klint, her work seems directly linked.
Absolutely. Her abstract paintings were an attempt to visualize the spiritual concepts and messages she encountered through her theosophical connections.
And Kandinsky.
Wassily Kandinsky, yeah. He wrote about the spiritual in art, and his ideas about the power of color and form were heavily influenced by Theosophy's discussions of spiritual planes and vibrations.
Pete and Mondrian, too, with the geometric grids.
Mondrian also engaged deeply with theosophical ideas about universal harmony and spiritual reality underlying the physical world. So, while spiritualism left us stories of séances and ectoplasm, Theosophy helped shape the visual language of modern abstract art.
What an incredible journey. From wrapping toes in a farmhouse to shaping modern art. Let's try to wrap this up. If you had to boil down 19th century spiritualism, what's the essence?
I think it really is that constant, almost unbearable tension. You have this incredibly deep, genuine human need, the grief, the longing for connection, the hope for an afterlife.
Set against what seems to be, in most documented cases of physical phenomena, systematic and often quite cynical fraud.
Exactly. Calculated exploitation playing on raw vulnerability. The history, especially when you look at the physical mediums, is just littered with exposures.
So what's the lasting takeaway from all that skepticism? From Houdini, from the Seibert Commission?
They really helped establish some fundamental ground rules for investigating extraordinary claims. The idea that proof demands rigor.
Controls.
Yes, controlled conditions designed specifically to exclude the possibility of fraud. Good lighting, control over the medium, examination of the equipment. They insisted that claims about the ethereal had to stand up to scrutiny under the material laws of evidence. They set a standard for skepticism.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. If the historical record is so overwhelmingly full of evidence pointing towards fraud, especially for the physical stuff,
the confessions, the investigations, the exposures.
Right. If that's the case, why does that deep human desire to contact the dead, to believe in survival, persist so strongly? Even today, when science and logic seem to offer little encouragement.
That impulse, that yearning to believe our consciousness isn't just extinguished, that there's a summerland waiting, that we can somehow bridge that gap. Maybe that's the real phenomenon here. It seems to be the one truly unstoppable force in this whole story. Regardless of whether the mediums were genuine or, as the judge said, greedy imposters, that profound human hope keeps searching, keeps knocking, keeps wanting to believe, even after the curtain's been pulled back so many times. Maybe that longing itself is the most powerful thing spiritualism ever managed to conjure.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.